Hello, friends. How are you? This week is again full of activities at the global level. Number one is that the G77 plus China, though attended by 125 nations, has ended in Cuba. It was being held at Havana, the capital city. Cuba, as you know, is in South America, and the only small nation which came in confrontation when USSR was there about 60 years ago. It's known as the Cuban Missile Crisis, where nuclear missiles were intended to be brought in ships from Soviet Union and placed in Cuba. US at that time was headed by President Kennedy, and there was a very tense period of negotiations, and Mr. Khrushchev, the then party president in USSR, also bowed down, and the crisis was avoided. But imagine that this particular small country then suffered economic sanctions at the hand of USA, which continue till today after 60 years. Both President Kennedy and Mr. Khrushchev were considered statesmen to have avoided this. In the context of the US, one of its former presidents in the 19th century, Mr. Monroe, gave a statement which is then called Monroe Doctrine, that South America is backyard of USA, and then Panama Canal was also being made to connect the Atlantic with the Pacific, and he said that is our canal and that is our backyard, and nobody will ever dare to come here. And it has been so since then. There has been no attack from the outside. There have been no military bases from the outside in whole of South America, and continues to be the lake, if not backyard, of USA. So USA has no threat. On one side there is Canada. Then there is Alaska, which is now part of USA, which once was part of the USSR, but at that time the US government had purchased it for a very small price from USSR. So physically, USA is well protected, and whatever its military expenditure is there, which is huge, $858 billion, is spent mostly on equipment, which is latest and mostly digitized now, therefore very expensive, and in its 80 military bases abroad. So USA cannot act that, we are the keeper of the international order, we are the democracy types, we are the human rights fellows and all that. Because what would be the need of 80 bases throughout the world, military bases, obviously having either ships or manpower and land equipment there, unless it was for control of those areas. And this, in this tape, we are not going into kind of conflicts the USA has gone into over a period of time. They were justified, not justified. But it has always been in the name of democracy. French were the colonialists in Vietnam. They were getting defeated out. USA entered. And for 20 years, it bombarded Vietnam, made it into South Vietnam, it supported, and North Vietnam, which communists supported. And in the end, the communists won, and it had to be reunited. But the amount of human suffering it caused is unbelievable. Now, I mention that because there is a lot of things which are happening right now in Africa, specifically Francophone Africa, where France had the colonies. There are 14 nations, from Chad to Mali to Burkina Faso to Niger, where French ruled, and the manner in which they continue to rule through economic mechanisms which are strained. So therefore, we will handle that separately. But today that issue is coming because there is coup after coup after coup. Every month there have been 5 coups. Another coup in Burkina Faso to push out the current person, Captain Tereno, and otherwise in the West Africa region alone, There have been many coups and counter coups going on, and we will handle that separately in terms of how many coups are there in the last 20 years, 23 of them, and who is done it and what's the situation today. But the current situation in what is called the Sahel region is very, very hot. Um, they have asked the coup leaders, the new coup leaders have asked the American bases to be shut off, France to be shut off, to be asked to take the troops out, um, and then there is an organization called ECOWAS. That's an economic grouping, actually, not a military grouping of the West African nations. Nigeria is chairing it, and Nigeria is the biggest country in that. Nigeria is the biggest country in whole of Africa, with the largest population, the largest GDP also. So now we will hold it there, and then come to some specific topics of what happened in the G77. Hardly anything, because nobody listens to them. So otherwise, 125 nations is very, very big, but none of the G20 nations is a member of that. China is a permanent invitee, but not a member. So in a sense, China has a free run of the game to influence this group of nations, which are basically global South nations. In the G20, as we have already described, under the presidency of India, African Union of 50 nations has been inducted as a permanent invitee. So now we come to the United Nations General Assembly meeting, which started yesterday. This is the 78th meeting. I will just summarize the four major speeches. One is of Mr. Joe Biden, the President of USA, when the hall was full. Then Mr. Zelensky has been invited to make a speech, but the Russian president has not been invited because they talk about arrest warrant against him, etc., etc. So therefore shun him. Though Mr. Lavrov, the foreign minister, has come, but he cannot substitute for Mr. Putin for making a speech. Then there is Africans who are speaking, and I might refer to the speech of Mr. Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, also who was the president of BRICS, and now BRICS Plus. That means 5 nations plus 10 nations, 15 countries. Now, we have elsewhere summarized what happened at BRICS meeting, at the G7 meeting earlier in Tokyo, at the G20 meeting in Delhi last week. And we also know that one of the sensitive things about the Ukraine conflict, the G20 had soft pedaled it by saying that, we would like to have peace in this area, ceasefire in the area, and so on, but did not blame Russia, or as they keep on saying, Mr. Putin. The ink is not yet dry on the leaders' declaration there in Delhi. And here you have Mr. Joe Biden yesterday making a speech which is basically against Russia and in the context of the Ukraine war. I am surprised. So let's quote what he has said. We, all of you must stand up to Russia's aggression. We cannot let Ukraine down. Earlier, for whole 1.5 years, since February last, they have been, USA has been talking, and the spokesperson have been talking. We will be with Ukraine for whatever it takes. We will support it for whatever it takes. Yes, now the election years are coming. Mr. Joe Biden will face election in another year's time. So also the Indian election will be there. So also Mr. Trudeau, Canada, will have face another election in about a year's time. And we'll come to that. That's something which has happened in that context. And what is the implication of that? So what he says is that Moscow is counting on the other nations to grow tired. Now it has to be seen in the context that whole of NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is not just limited to North Atlantic, because you have the USA, you have the Canada, you have the Australia as members. But be that as it may, there is a committee of 50 nations, which is called the Ukraine Aid Committee. It's mostly military aid we're talking about, headed by the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Austin, of the USA. And they collect all the things, military equipment, etc., etc. And they have done it for billions upon billions of dollars. But it has not made any difference. In September, no, sorry, earlier than that, even in July. July, they launched a spring offensive in Ukraine, in the areas where the Russian forces had already taken over. And mostly it is the four obstructs, or the areas or districts or provinces like Donetsk and Luhansk and Zaporizhia, where the old nuclear plant is there. So four republics. Crimea was acquired by Russia in 2014. And they did it because they kept on repeating that Russian ethnicity people were being discriminated against. And so also in these four provinces. And since they did not agree, though there was a Minsk declaration that, this will happen, that will happen, and their language will not be disturbed, and they will not be discriminated against in government jobs, etc., etc. But nothing happened. So Russia had its own grouse about it. Russia had written to them many times, and then wrote to UN many times. But be that as it may, 2014, then they did special military operation, and within few hours they acquired that territory, which is touching the Black Sea. So very important from naval ships as well as for the grain shipments, to which we will come specifically soon. Then that Republic of Crimea, that is, had also gone through a referendum, and it supported joining Russia, which under the UN Charter it's possible. A particular area can say that we do not want to continue with this particular country anymore, and we want to have a separation republic, and then they can vote it and come to that conclusion. Though UN people will say that it should be done under our supervision, etc., etc. Okay. Now I go a step further. Now, whatever that fight has been there in the rest of Ukraine, suddenly Russia did not get up to say that I want to go and fight. Everybody knows in fight there is a lot of losses. The peace is always better for commerce and for life, and obviously expenditure, because it's not easy to do the modern wars. They are highly expensive. And of course, it disturbs the economy right there, just as it did for the grains produced in Ukraine and going out, and also Russia. And so for which they had a temporary agreement called the Black Sea Grain Initiative, and somehow those grains moved since July last up to July 17 July this year, and we will soon come to that. So there is a lot of disturbance. Ukraine, for example, and both Ukraine and Russia are the leading exporters in the world of wheat. We listen about Australia and all that, but the quantities are not that large. USA and Australia don't export that much as Ukraine does, because its population is not that much, so self-consumption is not much. Though our production is more. Our production in state of Madhya Pradesh itself, 31 million tons, is equal to the export of wheat of Ukraine. Okay, so now what does Mr. Biden say? Mr. Biden says that Moscow is counting on nations to grow tired. But if you see it from Moscow's point of view, it's the NATO countries which are getting tired. Their people are saying, why should we be spending so much money on Ukraine war? We have our own needs. That's point number one. Point number two, which otherwise we normally don't consider, but those who are in those countries, it really affects them. That millions of Ukrainians, also Russians, but Russians going to Central Asia, millions of Ukrainians have gone as refugees to the nearby countries. Poland is sharing the border. So Poland and Romania and the rest of the Europe, 40 countries, you think of it and they have gone there. Now when they go there, according to their law, EU law, certain things have to be provided to them. Food has to be provided, shelter has to be provided, etc., etc. And Poland is getting really tired. So only yesterday, when Mr. Zelensky was speaking in the UN, Poland has given a notice that from year 2024, they will not accept any more refugees. Though Poland has been also in the forefront of helping the other NATO countries to support Ukraine in terms of military equipment, in terms of having warehouses for the ammunition, and whatever you can think of, so that on border they are ready. But now they are splitting off. So what is happening is that stamina is getting lost on part of the NATO countries rather than Moscow. Moscow doesn't have direct support of any other countries. And there are 51 countries on the other side. So who is losing stamina? One does not know. There were so many sanctions put on Russia, economic sanctions, but their impact has been very little because Europe really needed that oil. So if they did not get it directly, they got it indirectly. They needed the products, so oil was coming to Indian refineries, Nayantra, which is a former SR refinery. Also now it's basically owned by Russian oil company. From there, the products were going to Europe. So when they need the products, then what is it? You have blown away those pipes, Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. So let's come to that. Spring offensive has therefore not meant any difference. There is hardly any other meter of land which has been taken back from Russia. So if they are looking at it from objective point of view, they should say that we are not going to win the war by arms. And we will have to look at other means. Now in other means, interestingly, the NATO countries have not moved any peace proposal. China moved a peace proposal, which Ukraine did not bother much about. African countries, led by Ramaphosa, the South African president, created a proposal. Zelensky produced a 10-point settlement plan, which also he described in UN, so I'll come to that, which basically says, leave our country, give back every inch of land, and give us reparations. Reparation will turn out to be many trillions of dollars because that means repairing of everything which has been blown off, though it's blown off in war. That is the meaning of reparation. And who can ask for reparation actually? Somebody who has won will say, that you give my land back, which I have won back from you, and also all the cost of spoiling it. When you have not won, how can you ask for it? But he continues to say that. I want reparations also. They had a meeting in London. IMF also came saying, let us estimate what is the cost of reparation and we will have private parties support that. Private parties mean that all those things will get owned by them. That's the meaning of it actually. They don't want to give single money from their treasuries. So let's finish what Mr. Biden has said. He says, we are counting on you, all the nations, because Moscow is counting on nations to grow tired. So that is where we stand on the Ukraine conflict. So let's say what Zelensky says. His main line is that Russia is weaponizing everything from food to energy to kids. Now, I will not talk about this kids part because this is something really horrible which the Western media and Ukraine have created. So before that, weaponizing of everything, okay, fine. You're saying everything, then from food to energy. Now, food to energy, who has weaponized the energy in that? These are big two pipelines, Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2, and then there are some minor ones also coming from Siberia. Something which USSR/Russia did all the excavation, put all the equipment, very, very difficult terrain, frozen all the time. How men work there, I can't even imagine. And laying down the pipelines, again, not easy in the frozen land, laying down all the pipelines, bringing it up to Germany. via Belarus and Poland, and via Ukraine also there is a line. And then the Europeans, plus the Americans, because there is some write-ups which have come, which suggest that actually it was done under the guidance of USA, but they don't admit it. Then there was it come that was only the Ukrainians, and before that they had said the Russians blew them up. Now on that I want you people to reflect. If there are pipelines brought from one end of Siberia, a couple of thousand kilometers, to Europe to supply that oil, supposing I put myself in the shoes of that particular company, Russian company, will I destroy those pipelines costing $14 billion 20 years ago? Will I? I might shut them off or something. Will I destroy them? No, I won't destroy them. Even now, after things settle down here, probably those pipelines may have to be redone. But alternatives now are emerging, which we have also talked, and we will talk separately on what are all the other alternatives. Now, so this is about the energy. Did the Russian companies say that we will not supply you oil and the LPG? No. You had sanctions. You told all the EU members that don't buy anything from them. Not only that, you said no, others also should not buy. Then you said you cannot buy more than $60 because we don't want them to become strengthened. We don't want them to have any profits. Market price is $80 plus, and you say that you will not give more than $60. So who is weaponized? Now, when India took the neutral stand, it told its companies and traders saying, "Why you can buy it," but they were very hesitant, and the USA threatened it that if India is buying it, EU people also threatened it. To which Mr. Jaishankar, our foreign minister, said, "Bhai, you are hypocrites. You are buying indirectly still, and what I buy in 1 month, you buy in 1 day," which is true when he said that. So who is weaponizing this? You are even telling others not to buy it. You are dictating to others not to pay more than a particular price. If it is so that we will stop your ships, and whatever money was lying of the Russian government and its central bank and its major industries, etc., about $700 billion, not million, you had captured. You stopped access to GPS for them. You stopped access of SWIFT to them, right? And then they say that Russia is weaponizing it. Personally, I don't think so, but put the data in front of you that he's saying that, and this is the counterfeit. This is how to think and make up one's own mind. They say they are a habitual aggressor. Well, you start counting. One way of counting is that the USA has economic sanctions on 40 countries. Iran, Iraq, Libya, Venezuela, Cuba, etc., etc. Whosoever has got resources, especially oil resources, put economic sanctions on them, make them very poor, and then squeeze them. So who is the habitual aggressor in that? What has USSR done? Yes, it went to Afghanistan, but it came out, and then USA went into Afghanistan for 20 years. What job, what work they had in that? They claimed that Osama bin Laden was there, but he was never there because finally he was found in Pakistan. Now, just imagine saying somebody who I think is a terrorist. You've not taken him to the court of law to find that out or so. And therefore, I will invade a whole country and destroy it. Afghanistan got destroyed. But Afghans are of a particular kind. They can do guerrilla warfare and all that. In the end, they actually defeated USA. Just last month, there was an Africa summit. Every country has been doing an Africa summit. USA, China, Brazil, whatnot, EU. So they had an Africa summit. And Mr. Putin announced that $23.4 billion debt, which is due from Africa, we waive it off. He announced that poorer countries, especially those who are now going through these coups in Africa, and poor country basically, sub-Saharan Africa, we will give so much of wheat as a gift. Which was once again announced a couple of days ago in the context of doing some thing again in the Black 1 million tons. And you talk about they being aggressors everywhere. You start counting how many places NATO has aggressed, and which has nothing to do. They are not close to Europe. They have never attacked Europe. They have not even sent any terrorists over there. But you are talking about the terrorists somewhere else, and therefore we will come in. And in case of Iraq, what did it do? You said there are weapons of mass destruction there. Okay. They said we don't have weapons of mass destruction. UK then Bajao Tali again that they have weapons of mass destruction, and Tony Blair, PM at that time, showed some papers in the. And they attacked the country, saying that you got weapons of mass destruction, we will spoil, we will destruct those factories. They found nothing. Then they said, no, you have nuclear plants. Then they said, you got biological weapons. So one way or the other, in the end, they killed Saddam Hussein, acquired all the petroleum lands, and gave it to their companies, and then announced to the rest of the world, no, they don't have weapons of mass destruction, and so on and so forth. So imagine now these have become the techniques. When pressures are put, Canada has put pressure on us yesterday because they want to interfere with the coming elections. So this weaponizing, this business of threatening, this business of claiming that there are terrorists in your boundary, therefore we will destroy you, is something which has to now go away. Therefore, there has to be a campaign against going towards peace in society, peace in the world. And what disturbances which happen in one particular area travel to the other area. Mr. Zelensky says, quote, less than what a military victory would have done. So the end of aggression should be on terms of states that it had won. Strange statement. You have not won. When January special military operation, as Russia calls it, and you call it aggression, started, they have acquired certain lands where majority Russians are there who were being suppressed. Right? Now they have done the referendum, they have gone to Duma, that is the equivalent to Parliament of USSR, and got themselves affiliated with the Russian Federation as republics. You have not been able to get single inch of land back. And say we should have the term settled as if we have won. As if we have won, कोई game है, बच्चों का game है. So therefore there should be Russian withdrawal and reparations, he says. And there should be summit to decide this, even if we know that it will not be possible to get it from them. Russia's 700 billion plus has been captured and frozen by the US and the Europeans. None of their business actually do it. Some hospital money is there, some company money is there, some reserve money of the central bank of a country is there, and you capture it, and they can collapse. Economic collapse can be there. I mean, luckily they have these resources to sell, so they have regular income. Otherwise, the budgets they will not be able to meet for salaries also. So therefore, what he has said umpteen time, he has been invited always by the EU meetings and G7 meetings and whatnot. India did not invite him for the G20 meeting, rightly so, because it's a fight between Russia and Ukraine. We are neutral in it, so why should we give podium to one particular party to repeat same thing? Now, Asia is taking initiative. For example, China is taking initiative. Had taken initiative. Thanda Basta. Africa has taken initiative. Thanda Basta. Kingdom of South Arabia, along the other Arab nations, took an initiative for peace proposal. Thanda Basta. Even India has been saying it's not an era of war, and so there is some negotiation. India could be involved as a mediator because it has not taken any side. Okay, so that is Zelensky. What Mr. Lavrov has said, we will know afterwards, except that When the Africans have said this, the chairs are empty. A lot of pictures are there. So, like any other forum, then it is a subsidiary of USA or at the maximum G7. They come, they speak, their agenda, and so on and so forth. Now, when the UN Secretary General comes, he has those three standard things. World is having problems. There is food problem. There is food security problem. There is energy security problem. I can write a speech for them. These standard four things, then climate action. Now, climate action, as we discussed in the yesterday's episode, that is climate problems to the developing world, but actually EU is putting 25% to 35% tariff as a green tax. This is the help they are giving. He has therefore called for reform in the UN Security Council, because India and big countries like that, like Brazil, etc., are not permanent members. All the members are now, except China, which has been inducted. All the white European countries and USA, nothing else. And then they have by rotation certain members and all that who don't have a veto, therefore it doesn't really count. So Mr. Biden also said the same thing. Reforms in UNSC are required, just as it was stated in G20 declaration also.